Look how there's ice on the
There's a little bit on the other side.
That's weird. He's fast. Look how that sand is.
Oh, cool.
So it is now late December 1753. So it took him a while to get up here. So I've been out here for 2 months now almost. Snow's falling and it's so cold the creeks are frozen. Washington and Gist are alone on foot, and Washington is in a hurry to get back to Virginia and make his report to Governor Dinwiddie. Gist writes on December 26, from somewhere near where we are today, quote, "We walked 18 miles. Washington was very tired. It was very cold. This made it hard to get water since the creeks were frozen." The following day, December 27th, Gist and Washington get a hiking companion, and Washington has his first close brush with death. Find water, shelter, warmth.
You need to go south.
To the north.
The forks of the Ohio is south. You need to get back to Dinwiddie.
Stop! Let me go, George.
Told you not to trust him. His gun.
You alright? Hurt? Okay. So, the enactment you just saw was George in blue, Christopher Gist with the cap on here, and an Indian. Gist wrote, "We started out at 2 o'clock in the morning and walked to Murdering Town. Here we met an Indian who called me by name." So the Indian knew George, or Gist rather, but Gist didn't necessarily know the Indian. "He pretended to be glad to see me. We asked the Indian if he could show us the shortest routes to the forks of the Ohio. The Indian seemed glad to go. He carried George Washington's pack. We traveled about 8 or 10 miles. The Indian seemed to be steering us too much to the north. The Indian became disagreeable and I mistrusted him. We traveled 2 more miles when Washington said we would camp at the next creek. Before we got to the creek, we came to an open meadow. It was very light with snow on the ground. The Indian made a sharp stop, turned around and pointed his gun and fired." So that's what you just saw. It seemed as if this Indian knew who they were and he was there to intercept them and maybe take them in the wrong direction, and perhaps, we don't know, there were other Indians waiting in that other direction, and when Gist and Washington didn't want to follow the Indian any further, the Indian took a shot at George at very close range and just barely missed him. Washington said, as you heard, "Are you shot?" Or Washington asked, "Are you shot?" "No," I said. The Indian went to reload his gun, but Washington and Gist were soon on him. Gist wanted to kill the Indian, but Washington, not wanting to cause trouble with the natives in the area, eventually decided to release the Indian after taking his gun. Gist writes that as darkness fell, we set our compass, fixed our course, and walked all night to get away from him, the Indian. So you just saw the reenactment, and these gentlemen here have been doing this for a long time, and they've got a lot of knowledge about Washington and what occurred at the time. You guys want to say anything?
Yeah, does anybody have any questions?
Why do you wear blue? I thought the colors were red for the English.
They were. This is actually a match coat, which is nothing more than a blanket, just wrapped around you in a certain way. That's something that he wrote in his journal, that he kind of ditched his fancy clothes and put on a match coat.
So that were all the match coats like blue then, or?
Not necessarily. They were just a blanket.
Remember, he wasn't a British officer. He was an officer of the Virginia militia.
Right.
Anyone else? Very quiet crowd, this one.
So as far as the trek went, a lot of it on foot. We get asked a lot, well, where are your horses? They couldn't really travel. This was a pretty rugged terrain back then. This was the western frontier. And so there weren't really established trails as such. There were Indian trails, deer paths, game trails. So it would have been nearly impossible to navigate on horseback.
Did they do some of it on horseback though?
From Virginia, yes, they did. Walked all the way back to Richmond. It took 77 days from this point, so covering between 20 and 30 miles a day, and night, depending on when they're walking.
And were there times that the French sent them off in some canoes or something for a short period? Or I thought I read something about that.
The French sending them away?
When after they left the
Oh, well, they did have to ford rivers and such. You'll hear about that a little later.
I think you're right. When they left Fort LaBeouf, I think
I
they
thought they
attempted
escorted
to
them with
travel
some
back
Indians
down
or
to Franklin, or they called it Venango, by canoe, but the river, French Creek, was too frozen, I think. But they did have some horses up until that point in time, and I think their party split up for some reason as well. And as I say, George ended up having to walk the rest of the way, at least as far as to where Pittsburgh is now. Okay, there's no more questions.
Long walk.
Yeah. Oh, there we go.
Did his journal say anything about like what kind of food that he ate? Or, like...
Not so much specifically about the food they ate, but the type of food they would have been carrying would usually be dry goods, either salt pork, oats, peas, anything that wouldn't perish. They would load up on that at Murdering Town, at any place they could. The meat they would take from the trail. They would take game on the trail, either rabbits, deer, whatever. But yeah, it wasn't really. It was kind of food you ate because you had to, not because it tasted good.
Yeah, and they were probably all pretty skinny at the time, is my guess.
Yeah.
I have a question.
Yes.
So you mentioned Murdering Town a couple times.
Yeah.
Where would that be?
I'm not sure anybody knows for a fact, because it's not a place that's on the map today, but I believe it was possibly down where Harmony is.
Yeah, Evans City, Harmony is about where Murdering Town probably was. They don't know the exact location, but it's right around that area.
And why?
Well,
I think that's also a mystery.
yeah,
Yeah.
it wasn't really a nice place. It was actually a big trade center for the area. Natives and French alike would meet there at the trade, so there were lots of different tribal affiliations in the area that would meet there. So it wasn't too unusual that we would meet up with a native. Gist didn't trust him from the get-go, but he liked to listen to George's stories, and George kind of liked people to listen to his stories, so he invited them along.
So what you're saying is they met this Indian in murdering him in Durham City, and he led them north rather than south.
He wanted them to go north, yeah, he was steering them not where they wanted to go. And his motives aren't really known, whether he was just wanted to mug them or if he was working for the French. Nobody really knows what his motives were. Nobody knows who he was.
Yeah, and they were attempting to go southeast to Pittsburgh area, but he kept taking them a little further northeast. When they finally decided, no, we're going the wrong way. This is enough. We've gone too far off track. And that's when the Indian took a shot at George. And fortunately, he missed him. Any other questions? All right. Well, I'm going to pass right through here, and we're going to walk back across the bridge.
Did you find that interesting?
Do you want a picture with that? No? Come on now.
Is there going to be any more stuff like that?
I don't know, probably not.